to the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd. And man, a win for Philadelphia Union and Philadelphia Union 2 this weekend. Double duty for myself with the game on Friday and then going to the Union 2 game on Saturday. Beautiful weekend we had, and honestly, I thought the game was going to be a downpour on Friday, like I said last episode, and it wasn't like that at all. It was humid, but the game was able to get played and we were able to get through. And it was funny. Kyle Olney and I were supposed to go live after the game, and we go into the press conference, we go into the mix zone with the players, and all you hear is just the rain pouring down. And it's like, well, at least it wasn't like this during the game. So we had to scratch our plans of going live in the stadium and didn't give you guys a live episode, but maybe this Tuesday, maybe a live episode with Jose Nunez, Mike Barrera, potentially, AAT Sports, speaking it into existence. Haven't mentioned anything to Jose, so when he listens to this, he'll be like, yeah, let's get this done. Hopefully he says that, hopefully. But a lot of news to talk about. We're going to go ahead and talk about that Philadelphia Union versus CF Montreal game. Go ahead and give my thoughts on Philadelphia Union 2 versus Chicago Fire 2. Go ahead and talk about blunder of the week. But yeah, I just thought overall this was a fantastic weekend, great weather, and I hope you guys had a fantastic weekend as well. But without further ado, let's get straight into the news. All right, so I said it last episode, we have a lot of news to talk about, specifically transfers, because the transfer window closes in 2 days. You guys are listening to this podcast Monday morning. If I would have done a live show, then it technically would have been 3 days. But clubs are getting deals done left and right. A lot of news to keep you guys up to date with. And so we'll start with Real Salt Lake. They have acquired attacking midfielder Diego Gonçalves from Danish Superliga club FC Copenhagen. Real Salt Lake paid a fee of $3 million for the 27-year-old. Gonçalves had 58 goals and 44 assists in 306 appearances between Copenhagen and his boyhood club of Benfica. And this is an impressive move because I know right off the bat, Philadelphia Union fans are going to complain. Real Salt Lake paid $3 million. They're a much smaller market team than Philadelphia Union, and they're paying $3 million for a player. They pay over $6 million for Chico Arango last season, and I understand the frustrations. Columbus, they're a team that's spending a lot of money too. Smaller market than Philadelphia. Cincinnati, a smaller market than Philadelphia as well, and they're spending a lot of money. And it is very disheartening for Philadelphia Union fans when you see just smaller market teams spending so much more money than what the Union spent, just continuing smashing the highest fee paid that the Union paid for Mikael Uhre of $2.8 million a few seasons ago. But another thing that I think that's interesting about this deal for Gonçalves is it's a team going back to Denmark, and we've seen. I feel like the last couple of transfer windows, really, where it's a lot of center backs coming from Denmark to MLS. There's a lot of attacking players that are coming from Denmark to MLS. Hani Mukhtar is a player that's one of the best in MLS, and he came from Denmark. And I do like where MLS is going. They're seeing that, yes, the Superliga is the top league in Denmark. They're not a top 5 league at all. You can argue they're not even a top 10 league. You could make the argument that they're probably around the same level as MLS. And these guys are leaving Denmark because I can remember when Mikael Uhre gave his interview a few years ago when he was signed from Brøndby. He said the taxes were insane in Denmark for professional soccer players. And so a lot of those players, they want to retire comfortably. And you get taxed so heavily over in Denmark. And so after establishing themselves over in that league, over in that country, then they look to move abroad. And that's one of the reasons why Mikael Uhre came over to the Philadelphia Union, was because he wasn't going to be as taxed as heavily as he was in Denmark. And I hope that MLS continues to scout this market, continue to buy players from this market, because time and time again, I feel like we see just really talented players coming over from Denmark. Moving on to the Columbus Crew, though, and they've been busy this window. They have acquired defender DeJuan Jones from New England Revolution in exchange for defender Will Sands and $600,000 in GAM, plus a sell-on percentage going back to New England. So DeJuan Jones, 27 years old. He had 6 goals, 22 assists, and 142 matches with the Revolution. He was a part of that 2021 side that won the Supporters Shield. A really, really good player for New England as one of the fullbacks with Brandon Bye. And you always knew when you would play New England that Brandon Bye and DeJuan Jones were always going to get for it. They were always going to be a difficult task for the Union's center backs, for their wing backs to deal with, because these guys are just always pushing up. And we saw DeJuan Jones actually score on his debut, I believe it was, in League's Cup. I believe he got the 3rd goal. And look, he goes from a team that's near the bottom of MLS to one of the best teams in the whole league. Will Sands, he's 24 years old, 0 goals, 3 assists in 25 matches. He's recovering from an ACL tear earlier in the 2023 season. And New England, they're getting a lot of cap relief with trading DeJuan Jones to Columbus. And you look on paper and say, yeah, wow, they're getting a lot worse. You get rid of one of your best defenders, but the move we're going to talk about here in a second, New England Revolution paid a ton of money for another attacking player from Argentina. We'll get to that in a second. But yeah, they were just looking for salary relief, looking to solidify themselves for bigger moves ahead of this window and specifically the next winter transfer window. And so both clubs come away with what they feel like a fair trade. And then we see Columbus ground and they acquire a right back again in Andres Herrera on loan from River Plate. And the Crew also have a purchase option, was at the 2020 Olympics with Argentina. Herrera arrives with 8 goals, 8 assists on 141 matches across River Plate and his boyhood club of San Lorenzo. And so, again, we see Columbus making moves, a smaller market. And again, and this is what fans look at and say, this is what pisses us off, where it's smaller market teams going out constantly just putting the Union to shame. They're continuing to make a stronger side. We saw Columbus Crew win MLS Cup next season. And what do? Continue to get stronger. And yes, very disheartening for Philadelphia Union fans, but look, Columbus show you how it's done. They made LAFC look like fools last year in MLS Cup. A great attacking trio between Rossi, Ramirez, and Cucho Hernandez. A fantastic attacking trio there in Columbus. They sell Aiden Morris, like we talked about a few weeks ago, who actually had a very bad pass in his debut with Middlesbrough that should have been put in the back of the net. He escapes huge blunder, probably should have won blunder of the week, but Aiden Morris lives to fight another day for blunder of the week. But again, just Columbus continuing to get better. And the New England Revolution, just staying with them. Both clubs, very, very busy so far this transfer window. The Revs have acquired forward Luca Lingani from Argentina powerhouse Boca Juniors. New England paid a transfer fee of $7 million for the 22-year-old. He'll be a U22 initiative signing. 11 goals, 4 assists, and 70 career appearances. And again, we're seeing teams just spend a ton of money to bring in attacking talent. And so far, it's working out for a lot of teams. There's reports that Real Salt Lake could sell Gomez this transfer window. The 21-year-old Colombian having a fantastic season out there in Real Salt Lake. Talked about it a couple of weeks ago that Inter Miami have sold Diego Gomez to Brighton. They paid $3 million for him, and they're making up to $18 million for a player that's only been with them for one season. And again, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but these are moves that you want to see the Philadelphia Union make. You want to see them go out and spend a $2 million, $3 million and develop players and in a couple seasons make double, triple the profit of what they paid. And I don't see why the Union couldn't develop those players. They do a fantastic job developing the players they have with the limited amount of money that they spend. But you got to imagine, if they're spending a little bit more money on more talented players, then they'd get higher transfer fees when selling those players. And it still bothers me a little bit that you get Julian Kranza for funny money, and you probably should have sold him last summer and made around $8 million for a player that you paid fake money for. But the Union turned it down, thought that they could go and win MLS Cup. Doesn't happen that way. And yeah, it's really disappointing. And I don't know what it's going to take for the Union to get involved in some of these moves, but you hope with more and more clubs spending crazy amount of money for attacking players, and after a year or two of them being in MLS, they get sold for double, triple the fee, and maybe the Union will eventually wake up. Who knows? But moving on again to another deal by New England Revolution. They have acquired Tim Parker and $600,000 in GAM from St. Louis for Henry Kessler. So both clubs swap center backs, plus GAM goes to New England once again. Tim Parker, 31 years old, has 6 goals, 4 assists, and 267 matches, spanning 10 MLS seasons, most notably with New York Red Bulls. He was a 2023 MLS Best 11 player last season with St. Louis in their debut season. Henry Kessler, we all remember him for, chucking the ball into the stands at Subaru Park. And he'll forever be an enemy anytime he steps into Subaru Park because of those actions. Kessler, 26 years old, was also a part of that 2021 Shield-winning Revolution side. And so St. Louis get a little bit younger. They get a player that has national team experience, while New England, they're getting GAM. That's why they did this deal. They're solidifying their GAM for the season, for next season, so they can continue to make huge moves. And I think both teams will be happy once again with this deal. Speaking of center backs, Charlotte have signed center back Tim Ream from Fulham. Ream is signed through 2026 with an option for 2027. The 36-year-old defender is a key player, or I should say was a key player with the USMNT, earning 61 caps to date, nearly 450 combined appearances for Fulham and Bolton Wanderers in England. So this is a move that doesn't make a ton of sense to me because Melandra is playing fantastic as one of the two center backs in Charlotte. And then you have Andrew Privet, who I think is also playing really good for Charlotte. You got to imagine Tim Ream's going to take that starting spot from Privet, but who knows? Maybe Charlotte goes to a 3 in the back. We shall see. But Charlotte's been one of the best defensive teams this season without Tim Ream. You expect a player that's been a staple, like I said, for the national team, for Fulham. So going to come in there and just help this back line even more with his leadership and just helping develop Melandra and Privet and showing them what they need to do to get to the next step in their career of, making that move to Europe and hopefully potentially making it into their national teams. But Tim Ream back to MLS, and he'll make his debut potentially against his former club, New York Red Bulls. But the last move that I want to talk about is CF Montreal have acquired midfielder Caden Clark from Minnesota United FC. Minnesota, they'll receive up to $150,000 in GAM, a second super draft pick, plus a sell-on clause. And Caden Clark, I think's promising player, or he was a promising player coming out of that Red Bull system, and all the hype around him. And I was talking to Kyle in the press box when I was going over my notes for the show, and I said, look, if Caden Clark would have lived up to the hype when he was coming through the Red Bull system, he definitely would have been on the Olympic roster with the U.S. this summer. But his career has just taken such a huge downfall from his last season in MLS with New York Red Bulls. We saw him get transferred to Leipzig, and Leipzig decided, hey, look, we're going to go ahead and move him back to MLS. He's not developing like we thought he would. And so Minnesota, after one season, decides to move him on to Montreal. And Montreal, we've seen them have success in the past with young players. He's still 21 years old, like I said. And I don't think that Caden Clark's career is anywhere close to being done. He's 21 years old. And of course, you're always going to go through rough patches. And I think if there's going to be a team that's going to give him a chance, a team that's going to be patient with him, it is going to be CF Montreal. And so Montreal looks to get younger in their attack, and Minnesota get a little bit of GAM, a second round draft pick in next year's super draft, and then they get a sell-on clause in case CF Montreal decide to sell him. But let's go ahead and talk about that Philadelphia Union versus CF Montreal game. As we know, the Union win this game 2-0. This was the Union's first win against Montreal this season. The Union have gone 1-1-1 now in 3 games against Montreal. All 3 of those games, we've seen the Union actually score 2 goals. And 2 out of 3 of those games, we saw the Union blow 2v1 leads. And the Union finally come in here and solidify a win. And it wasn't the most prettiest game. It wasn't the most entertaining game, but the Union did what they had to do. They dug in and got 2 late goals in both stoppage times in both halves. In the first half and the second half, both with Ty Baribo, who has 9 goals in 14 games this season, 7 goals in his last 6. And he just continues to be in the right place at the right time. It's a powerful shot from Sam Adeniran that the goalkeeper from Montreal spills. Ty Baribo is right there to poke it home with a first-time finish. And the second goal, it's a beautiful counterattack where the Union win the ball back in their own half. Jack McGlynn goes into Jeremy Raffanello. Raffanello with a really good pass out to McGlynn into space. It creates a 2v1 opportunity for the Union. It's a good pass by Jack into Ty Baribo. And it's, again, another first-time finish by Baribo. Fantastic finish, a striker's goal, as Jim Curtin called it in his post-game press conference. But the Union, they gave up chances in this game. Not a ton, but there was moments. Specifically, there's a moment where Bryce Duke was 1v1 against Andre Blake, and Andre Blake stands tall and makes a huge save, a game-changing save. And Jim Curtin talked about it, I feel like, every single game, because this is what it's been since Andre Blake's been with the Philadelphia Union. He'll make a save or two, maybe sometimes even more, that completely change the game. If Andre Blake's not there, that goal is probably going in the back of the net. And this is a different game. And Jakob Glesnes has thoughts on what I just said right there. We'll play his comments here in a little bit. But those saves that Andre is making are just as important as the goals that the Union are scoring. And again, we're seeing that there's issues defensively by this Union back line. They're not the tightest back line. They're not the best defenders 1v1. But because you have Andre Blake back there, he makes them look a lot better than what they actually are, which is fine because you need good goalkeeping. Good goalkeeping is hard to find. And fortunately for the Union, they've had goalkeeping that's been top of the league for a very, very long time. There's a reason why Andre Blake's a 3-time MLS goalkeeper of the year, 3-time starting 11 player in MLS. Should have won MVP a few seasons ago, in my opinion, in 2022, just because he was so vital for the Union getting to MLS Cup. And unfortunately doesn't win it. Hani Mukhtar, I believe, won MVP that season, beating out Daniel Gazdag. But Andre Blake continues continues to put this team on the back of his shoulders. And I said it last episode, you can make the argument that Andre Blake is the greatest Philadelphia Union player of all time. Whenever he decides to retire, he will be in that Ring of Honor. I would make the argument that Kai Wagner's the greatest Philadelphia Union player of all time, but Andre Blake is a close 1B. He is definitely a close 1B. If you're asking me to name my top 3 Philadelphia Union players of all time, I'm saying Kai Wagner, Andre Blake, and Julian Kranza. Yeah, there's some recency bias in there for sure. I'm sure some of the older fans would say, well, Latu definitely should have a say in being the top 3 Philadelphia Union players. And maybe that's a segment we do in the offseason, looking over top 3, top 5 greatest Philadelphia Union players of all time. I know I discussed that on Kyle and Jillian's show back in January at the Coaches Convention in Anaheim. But these recent Philadelphia Union teams would kick the floor with the best teams that Sebastian Latu was on. And I do think Seba's a fantastic player. And maybe you can make the argument if you put Sebastian Latu in some of these teams that we've seen the last couple of years with the Union, he would have even better numbers, which you're probably right. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. But Kai Wagner, Andre Blake, Julian Kranza, I mean, the Union have been spoiled with some really, really, really class players the last few seasons. And I would listen to anybody's argument for why they believe Andre Blake's the greatest Union player of all time. The Union's 7 shots in this game were on target. 7 of 12 shots were on target. Which is fantastic. Just they continue to put shots on target. And you guys have heard me talk about it before on the podcast where the Union are one of the best teams in the league. They have been one of the best teams in the league the last couple seasons with getting shots on target. Yes, they're creating a lot of chances, and those chances that they're creating aren't wasteful chances that are going over the bar, getting blocked. These are chances that are hitting the target. And it's been good goalkeeping at times by the opposition, but a lot of really good finishing we've seen by the Union the last couple of years. And I'll break down those numbers here in a little bit, but seven out of the Union's 12 shots were on target this game. Daniel Gazdag, he took a cleat or a knee towards his back. He exited this game. Jim Curtin said after the game that he was getting looked at, and there was really no update on him. But if Daniel Gazdag can't go on Tuesday against Cincinnati, or if he's out for an extended period of time, that's a huge blow for the club. Nate Harriel also had to exit this game too because of injury, which is unfortunate. He comes back from the Olympics, goes straight into the starting 11, and can't play the whole game because he gets injured. But the good thing is, Olivier Baizu has been in such good form here the last 4 or 5 games. And so you hope Nate is fine, that he's able to go Tuesday against Cincinnati. But if not, you have Olivier Baizu, who's been in really, really good form. And, he's got to feel bad that what does he have to do to keep his starting spot? And it's tough because Nate Harriel, prior to him leaving for the Olympics, was one of the Union's best players, was playing fantastic at right back. And I've also said that at times on the show in the past this season, where Nate Harriel's having a career year. He's been one of the Union's best players this season. And Jim Curtin's talked about it, when the Union were going through those tough stretches, the 10-game winless run, or 1 win in 17 games, whatever the stats are, really, really bad stats, that it's crazy that the Union have had players in really good form. Not the whole team, but individual players have been in really good form. Nate Harriel's been one of those players. Jack McGlynn's another. But yet the Union weren't able to find those results during that stretch of the season. But you get Andre Blake back. You get Jose Martinez back. Now suddenly, you have 5 games played at Subaru Park. Your last 5 games were played there. 4 wins, 0 losses, 1 draw. And Jim Curtin talked after the game about, just the positive results are finally coming at Subaru Park. And part of that is because the team's healthy.
Yeah, look, they're a team in Montreal that passes out of every situation, whether they're winning, whether they're losing, whether they're home or away. They take a lot of risk in their build-up. I told our players that we wanted to win the ball as high up the field as possible and kind of disrupt them. There's going to be moments where they do break us down, but can't get discouraged and trust that we're going to turn them over and create chances. And while it wasn't a beautiful game by any stretch, it's an important shutout and it's an important win to kind of survive and advance in this competition. I think that's 5, pretty solid performances at home where we got results in a row. So it gives everyone a little bit of confidence. I think, when you looked at the group that we had and the 23 names that we wrote on the board, it's the most kind of depth we've had with everyone being here, healthy, in good form. And had a strong bench, So I thought that overall it's a good night. Montreal does take risk, like you said. Everything they do is wide. There's not a lot in the center of the field, but we did a good job getting out, blocking crosses, and Andre had to make a big save in the first half on Bryce Duke. But after that, I thought, he did his job and wasn't too busy.
No, Andre Blake certainly wasn't busy in this game at all. Only 2 shots on target for Montreal. Andre Blake coming out with a huge, huge save in this game, like Jim Curtin just said, against Bryce Duke. And again, Andre Blake's going to give you 1 or 2 moments like that every single game. It is what it is for this back line. But once you have Andre Blake back there, you can rely on him to make those saves. His positioning is just so good. Just taking away those angles, his reactions are really, really good. His reflexes, really good. Just knowing when to dive, where to dive. And part of that goes to Phil Whedon, the Philadelphia Union's goalkeeping coach. But then the other part of that is Andre Blake's just really, really good. And so during this 5-game stretch at home, the Union have outscored opponents 12-2. They've kept 3 clean sheets. We've seen 4 different players score. Ty Bribo with 6 goals, Daniel Gazlag with 4, Jakob Glesnes with 1, and Quinn Sullivan with 1 goal. And I talked about the shots on target percentage for the Union in this game against Montreal, but if you actually look at the last 5 games, they had 50% of their shots on target against New England, 47 against Nashville, 50 versus Charlotte, 25 versus Cruz Azul, 58 versus Montreal. And so those 5 games, 46% of the Union shots are on target. The only one that was low was the Cruz Azul game, because the Union had 1 shot on target out of 4, and that 1 shot on target wound up going in the back of the net. So you can argue, once the Union got a shot on target, they were clinical. They finished their only shot on target. But in terms of shots towards the goal, 46% in the last 5 games. And that's very promising. That tells you right there that the Union are creating a ton of chances. Yes, they created a lot of chances against New England, against Nashville, against Charlotte, against Montreal, Cruz Azul. Good defensive team. The Union had to dig in that game. We talked about it last episode. But against some of these weaker oppositions, teams that you should beat, you're creating chances and you're hitting the target. And there's no wonder why you see Ty Bribo in fantastic form during these 5 games. 6 goals. Daniel Gazlag, 4 goals. And yes, those numbers are a little bit inflated because they've scored hat tricks, both of them in games against New England and a game against Nashville. But they're scoring. That's the main thing. They're in fine form. And again, we see it against Montreal. Ty Bribo gets a brace. Right place in the right time. First time finishing. Yes, didn't have a ton of touches against Montreal in this game. But any good striker is going to show you it's not about the touches. It's about what you do with that service. Gets perfect service from Jack McGlynn. Right place, right time for that shot by Sam Dinneron. And that's what good strikers do. They find ways with limited amount of services to put the ball in the back of the net. And we're seeing that with Ty Bribo. We saw it with Daniel Gazlag against Nashville. Limited amount of chances, and they're making the opposition pay. And so you hope that the Union can continue to ride the form of Baribo, of Gazdag, of Andre Blake, of Kai Wagner. You put Jakob Glesnes back into the starting 11, who prior to the Olympics, one of your best players, had a fantastic tournament with the U.S., got an assist coming off the bench against Montreal. In this midfield, you add Danley, who waiting on his visa. It's only going to make this midfield that much stronger and that much more difficult for Jim Curtin to pick his 4 midfielders. You got to imagine if Daniel Gazdag is healthy, good to go on Tuesday, he's probably the only midfielder in Jose Martinez that their spots are safe in the starting 11. But everybody else, it's up for grabs. And if Jakob Glesnes can continue to be in his fine form, then I'd argue too that, yeah, his spot's pretty much locked down as well. And so now you're dealing with all these other midfielders for one spot. And it's a good problem for Jim Curtin to have. And it's a good problem, I would argue, for this team where they rely so heavily on the press by the midfielders. And when they get out of gas, you bring somebody fresh off the bench that's going to press, win the ball back for you, and create chances. And so the Union are in a really, really good position right now, in my opinion, midfield-wise. Again, you hope Daniel Gazlag's not out too long. If he is out, okay, then you start to run into an issue because you don't really have anybody to play that number 10 role. Yeah, you have Jeremy Raffanello, but no offense to Jeremy, he is no Daniel Gazdag. Quinn Sullivan filled in that role once Gazdag went out and did okay, in my opinion. Could you throw Jakob Glesnes up there? Yeah, you probably could, but again, I think Jack's best position's a 6, and you're not going to play him as a lone 6 in the Union's diamond formation, so you play him as an 8. It's fine. But you hope everybody can stay healthy because the Union get healthy and they start getting back to the 2021, 2022 Philadelphia Union teams. But speaking of Andre Blake, Jakob Glesnes was asked after the game. Yeah, obvious. You look at Andre Blake's impact, it's huge. Andre Blake's a big reason why the Union have gone on this form. But is there any other reason that the Union have been this successful in the last 5 games?
The best keeper in the league. He should probably not be in this league, to be honest. So, of course, it's good to have him back behind us because if you mess up a time, he will save you. And you saw it today on the first save that he had. Bad touch for me, and he is true, and he's saving it. And that's the difference from earlier. Like, he's saving that, and then you see the shot that Sam is taking and ties on the rebound, and we get a goal. That wouldn't happen like 3 months ago. So now we just have to keep building confidence from what we have been doing now the last games, and keep building it because we know that we are good when we are all doing the same and when we have the full team back.
So yeah, again, you have your full team back. You expect results to go a lot different than they did a couple months ago. But no, I mean, the huge difference is Andre Blake. It's nothing that the team's doing differently. And yeah, he mentions the shot that Sam takes and then Baribo is there to put the ball in the back of the net. And those chances really weren't happening for the Union a couple months ago. So what he's basically saying is the luck's finally going the way. And Jim Curtin's talked about that too, where they weren't playing horrible during that bad run, but they weren't just getting any luck like they've had in years past. And soccer is a weird sport where, you know, some teams can be the luckiest teams in the world and some teams can be the Philadelphia Union where you have no luck. But you make those runs, you make those hard shots, and eventually things are going to start falling your way. And that's exactly what happened against Montreal. But yeah, everybody sees it. Andre's the best goalkeeper in the league. And I do find it funny that Jacob says, yeah, he probably shouldn't even be in this league. And fans have been saying that for years. But shh. Don't tell other teams that. Let the Union continue to enjoy having Andre Blake. And Andre did say on the dupe with Sage Hurley that he would like to retire in Philadelphia. And Yes, he's locked up long-term with the Union, but once that contract runs out, if his body's still healthy and whatnot, then yeah, he would love to continue to play in Philadelphia. He would love to continue to give his all for the city because they took a risk on him and drafting him out of UConn when the Union had a million goalkeepers, it seemed like, back in the day. So Andre's contract's good through 2026 with a club option of 2027. And we know goalkeepers can last for a very, very long time. And yeah, Andre's been pretty banged up this season, a lot of injuries this year. But if he continues to take care of his body, if he continues to, not force himself back from injuries, and part of that, yeah, Jim Curtin said is on him, on the coaching staff. I don't see why Andre couldn't play past 2027. Yes, they have Andrew Rick, who you would expect to eventually take over for Andre Blake, but if Andre can continue to be Andre, well, nobody's taking the starting spot from him. And so after the game as well, Jim Curtin, this is the last thing I'll mention about the game, and it really wasn't about the game. It's going back to my point about the midfield depth, where the Union have announced the signing of Danley, Jacques. We talked about Jose Nunez breaking that news last week. The Union officially announced it last week. And so Jim Curtin offers his thoughts on the signing of Danley and how he fits into this starting 11.
Danley he's trained with us yesterday. He's done a good job. You can see his ball winning ability, the intensity, the ground he'll be able to cover. Is it going to take a couple training sessions to get used to his teammates? But I think his skill set is one that suits the Philadelphia Union. I think when you think about the diamond, he can play at the base as a 6 by himself. He can play on either side as an 8. So he's a real weapon. And look, if you start and play 2 consecutive years, pretty much every match in French League One, you can play, right? So his work rate's going to fit the city. I think the fans are going to really like him, and he's now getting up to speed. Like I always say to the players, it's our job to make him feel comfortable and welcome and teach him the way we want to play, and it's his job to just be himself. And naturally now, as the time goes by, I wish there was more than 9 games left. Trust me, I do. But, it's going to be throwing him right into the fire and seeing how he responds. But certainly playing at the level he's played at, he'll be able to adapt and adjust and be ready. He's a sweet kid, quiet, shy, which I like. But on the field, the beauty of this game is you can be a totally different person. You can be the nicest guy off the field, but you can be a bad word on the field, and that's the beauty of the game. And he's a type of kid, I can tell already, that does his talking on the field. So he's quiet, which I love, but then on the field, he does his talking.
So I think my favorite thing during some of Jim Curtin's press conferences is you just heard him there, censor yourself, not say a cuss word. But then there's some times where he'll let loose and say a cuss word. It's so funny. When you can tell Jim's getting into his rants without thinking, he just lets loose. But then when Jim's actually thinking about what he's saying, he censors himself. And you heard Jim Curtin say there he's going to get thrown into the fire, Danley, which should be good, promising news for Philadelphia Union fans, because that hasn't always been the case with summer signings. And you hope that Jim Curtin can be a man of his word and Danley gets chances like we've seen Sam Adeniran. The difference is Sam's contract's up after the end of the season. Danley's contract's up after the 2027 season, I believe it is, or he has an option. I should have this written down. I know when I did my post about Danley signing, I had included all the information. Yeah, so Danley's signed through 2026 with options for 2027 and 2028. So yeah, it's a good deal that the Union have for Danley, Jacques, and it's promising words. Jim Curtin let known to the Union fans that he's going to get thrown straight into the fire. But speaking of the fire, these transitions, and I swear to you guys, I've not planned these on purpose. Maybe I'm getting good at transitions. I don't know. But the Philadelphia Union 2 took on the Chicago Fire 2. and beat them by a score of 3-2. And a couple thoughts, and we'll play 3 sound bites from this game. Mike Sheriden, the goalkeeper, fantastic for Union 2. Career high 7 saves, who was insane, immense for Union 2 in this game. And I think that this is a game that Union 2 probably should have lost. Coming into this game, U2 had lost 3 straight games, and they come back with David Vazquez coming back from the U20 CONCACAF Championship. Unfortunately, the U.S. fall to Mexico in the final in that game. David Vazquez continues his fine scoring. Scored 3 goals at the CONCACAF U20 Golden Boot winner. Scores a goal against Chicago Fire too, but Chicago Fire were really bringing it to Union 2 all game long. They were finding it way too easy, I thought, getting in behind the back line. Just a lot of mistakes from Union 2 where players are keeping the opposition on side. The back line just not communicating when to step, when not to step. And a lot of that is because this team's changing constantly, week in, week out, because players are getting caught up to the first team, so players are unavailable for the second team. You have some players like Macania who's injured. We've seen Macania and Neil Pierre be the 2 center backs pretty much most of the season with Union 2. So we see Carlos Rojas step in as a center back with Neil Pierre, and Rojas didn't have his greatest game. I thought Bradesio, who we've seen play as a right back, we've seen him play as a center defensive midfield, very versatile, didn't have his greatest game either. Frankie Westfield, fantastic, I thought, during the game. Neil Pierre, good. CJ Olney was okay. David Vazquez, Cavan Sullivan, Leandro Soria, all great. But in my opinion, Mike Sheriden was the Union's player of the game. 7 saves. And there was 2 or 3 1v1 opportunities, I believe it was, for Chicago Fire in this game. And Sheriden got his angles right, stood tall, was very confident. And he made huge saves. And just like Andre Blake, where Andre Blake wins games for the Union, Mike Sheriden absolutely won this game for Union 2. And so, unfortunately for me, I thought I was recording when we talked to Mike after the game, and I don't know what happened. Blunder of the week should go to me for, I guess, not recording. But I did get quotes from David Vazquez, from CJ Olney and Marlon LeBlanc. But yeah, Mike was talking about that second goal that Union 2 gave up. David Vazquez scores to make it 3-1. And as soon as he scores, Chicago come right back down and score to make it 3-2. And Sheriden was talking about, they're a young team, and it's a disappointing goal to concede, but they're going to learn from it. And, they lost their concentration. They score, make it 3-1, and it's a fantastic goal by David. But, yeah, they just fall apart in the center of the field, the 2 center backs, and let Chicago go right back the other end and put the ball in the back of the net. Luckily, it was pretty much the last kick of the game. But, yeah, I mean, if Vazquez doesn't score that goal, this is very concerning. And, yeah, Mike Sheriden definitely stood on his head all game and was fantastic for Union 2, I thought. Has 24 saves on the season for Union 2, and that was his 6th win this year, which is crazy. Six wins for Mike Sheriden, who wasn't expected to be their goalkeeper for majority of the season, but because of the injuries to Andre Blake, we've seen Andrew Rick play a lot more than what he would have thought he would have played with the first team this season. And Mike Sheriden, fantastic on the night. Like I said, I thought Neil Pierre, Cavan Sullivan, Leandro Soria, David Vazquez, and Frankie Westfield were all fantastic for Union 2 in this game. Cavan's dribbling ability is insane, just how close this kid can keep the ball at his feet. Gets an assist in the game to Leandro. And yeah, you can see why the hype's real about Cavan at 14 years old, and you do realize at times, yeah, he is a 14-year-old kid, does get muscled off the ball sometimes, but I don't know. I mean, his dribbling ability, how quick he is to shift directions, it's better than some players on the Union's first team. Like, this kid is the real deal, and I think you guys all know that. We all know that, and yeah, he was fantastic, fantastic in this game against Chicago Fire too. Glad to see Cavan just get another start in this game, play 72 minutes. But we also heard during the week, CJ Olney, we talked about it on the latest podcast, that CJ Olney got a contract as a Union homegrown. And I asked him after the game, what's the most difficult part? Like, how do you adjust to not knowing what your week to week's going to look like? Where we've seen you on the bench for the first team because of players away at the Olympics. We've seen you make your debut now with the first team, and because of that, sometimes you're not with the second team, or sometimes you're with the second team and not the first team. So how do you handle those difficulties? And this is what CJ had to say.
I mean, it's just a matter of staying consistent no matter which team I'm with. When I get the opportunities with the first team, whatever I get, obviously I want to take them as well as I can, and any opportunity, whether it's in my position, out of my position, 2 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is, I'll do what I can to take the moment I get. And with the second team, just coming down and doing my job and standing out and earning the right to play more with the first team, obviously just staying consistent and doing my thing.
And what I like about that answer is, yeah, it's not the longest answer in the world, but you can hear the confidence in CJ. This kid's only 17 years old, which is insane that at 17 years old, you've got a homegrown contract, you've made your debut with the first team this season. He's been one of the best players with Union 2 this year, which is part of the reason why he got the homegrown contract. He's creating a ton of chances, continues to created 2 chances against Chicago Fire too. And this is a player who just rose through the ranks. Wasn't with the academy for that long. It's good scouting by the Union to get him signed up for the academy. And you, of course, have to give credit to his previous clubs prior to coming to the Union. But since joining the Union organization, everything's come so fast for this kid. And that's a professional answer at 17 years old to say, hey, look, I just want to stay consistent and take my opportunities. And when I'm back with Union 2 playing consistent minutes, I want to continue to be the best player I possibly can to help move this team forward. And, maybe win Union 2 the MLS Next Pro Championship. Who knows? I mean, Union 2 is playing as one of the best teams in the league, and a big part of that is because of CJ Olney. And so after we talked to David, Mike, and CJ, Marlon came out and talked to us for about 8 minutes. And so I asked Marlon, yes, one of the most difficult things about your job is not knowing what guys you have available week to week. And how do you deal with that? And this is what Marlon had to say in response to that question.
The difficulty for there is on me, but that's why I think I'm entrusted to kind of deal with it, right? So it changes day to day. It changes literally the mornings off sometimes, but that's the project, and it's very different from the way everybody else handles their project. Our project is for the individual and the development and utilizing the second team to improve players so that they're ready for the first team. So it's a blessing and a curse in a lot of ways. The better of a job we do in the second team of doing that, that we end up maybe putting ourselves in a little bit of a situation where it's not the easiest to plan for or to deal with. But the project calls for David and Andy and CJ and Cavan and Neil and all these guys to go and be with the first team. And that's where they want to be. That's where that we want to get them. Albeit sometimes at the expense of our group from a cohesion standpoint. But, I think we work really, really hard on being organized and trying to be prepared for all the things that change. We were joking the other day how We had a game a couple years ago where Paxton Aronson was in the team, was taken out of the team, and then put back in the team to play for us. And we just have to kind of roll with the punches when things like that happen. So, I think it's probably harder on the kids because maybe they're in a situation where they're kind of getting yo-yoed sometimes, or maybe somebody thinks they're going to get some playing time, and all of a sudden the first team guy drops into the group. But for me, it's just about making sure that we continue to give them an environment where they can thrive in.
Yeah, and to give context, so the first question that was asked to Marlon, he was fuming because the Union had given up that second goal against Fire 2. And yes, Union 2 win, but he says, if it's not clear to me that I do not care about wins or losses, it should be after my response. Because he was talking about how angry he was for that second goal that they conceded. Because you can tell, this was my first time ever talking to Marlon LeBlanc. Yes, I've heard interviews with him in the past, but this was my first time in person with him. And you can tell that he cares so much about developing these kids. Yes, winning and losing is great. You can tell the players love that. But he really wants to develop these players. He wants to get them ready, push up with the first team. And he's done a really good job with that. It's been 4 players under his leadership this season that have got homegrown deals, and Andrew Rick, Cavan Sullivan, David Vazquez, and CJ Olney. Yes, you can technically say 5 players with Nick Periano, but Periano got a homegrown deal before he even stepped foot with Union 2 this season. And so that's why I consider it 4 players this season under Marlon's leadership. And I asked him, as a coach, how proud are you that you've seen 4 players now under your leadership get homegrown deals at such a young age? And this is what Marlon had to say in regards to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the job. And so super proud of CJ. I think his performance has certainly earned it. And I think with the guys that have come in that have done it, they've earned it. It hasn't been given to them. We'll continue to push this next crop and try to do more. And CJ's led the way, and the idea is that the young guys that are coming through see that, everyone's journey is not the same. CJ has not had this rising pathway. There's been ups and peaks, and there's been some valleys along the way too. But he's earned everything he's gotten, and I think honestly, you're talking about a 17-year-old kid. The best is still yet to come from, And all of these guys. Look, we played a young Chicago team, and believe it or not, we were still younger than they were today. Cavan, CJ, David, Neil Pierre is going to be there eventually. A lot of these guys are going to make it there. And then they've got these young guys who didn't get an opportunity to play today that are going to be the next crop. And so guys like CJ lead the way. I'm incredibly proud of him, and he serves as one heck of a I don't want to say resource, but and I don't even want to say use the wrong word to describe what he is to everybody else, but he's an example. That's probably the best word. He's a great example of how this process can work and work for players to make it to the first team.
Yeah, I mean, what a great response that was by Marlon. And you could tell in his response how proud he was of seeing CJ Olney get a homegrown deal this year. But not only CJ, you can tell that he's proud of this young team. And he said it multiple times this season in different interviews and whatnot that, yeah, we're the youngest team in MLS Next Pro, and Chicago Fire too. They were a young team, but we were still younger than them. And yes, Cavan Sullivan brings that number down a little bit at 14 years old, but this is a very, very young team. This is a team that is using a lot of players from the academy, a lot of players coming through the academy. And, you go through the academy, and I'm about to out myself here, but the Union have been pushing this whole pathway the last couple months, saying you go through the academy, then you go through Union 2, and then you go to the first team. I do think the pathway is a little bit of a joke. I do. But you are seeing kids go through the academy and get chances with the first team. And eventually, if you impress in the in the academy, you get Union 2 deal, and then if you really impress, then you get a first team deal, which, I do think some of the homegrown deals that we've seen the Union give out the last couple seasons, it kind of makes the homegrown deals look weaker in a sense, just because it's like, why are we not going to name names? Why are we giving this player a contract extension or a homegrown deal when they're not what you typically think of a homegrown? They're not a Paxton Aronson, a Mark McKenzie, a Brendan Aronson. Are you just giving this deal because you don't want other teams to have the opportunity to have this player? Are you only giving this person the deal to, fill out your Union 2 roster? So, yeah, I do think the homegrown deals have been a little bit overblown. I do think the pathway is a joke, but it is also true. We all know that Cavan Sullivan was going to get a homegrown deal regardless of how he did with Union 2 or not. It was just, okay, is he going to sign this deal? But CJ Olney, he's done fantastic to rise through the second team this season. Andrew Rick was probably eventually going to get a deal, and David Vazquez was definitely going to get a deal. It's part of the reason why he brought him over from California. But I think Frankie Westfield will be the next player in line. Neil Pierre, you heard Marlon mention him too, should be in line for a deal here in a year or so, maybe less. But a big part of that is Marlon LeBlanc just getting these players ready and watching them develop. Yes, they're going to make mistakes like they did on the second goal, but this is a team that really shouldn't be in second place in MLS Next Pro because of how young they are. But that's just a credit for Marlon getting these guys locked in week in, week out, or day by day, not knowing who he's going to have for training because, yeah, they're caught up for a Union first team game. And no matter what's thrown Marlon's way, he's done a fantastic job, in my opinion, dealing with just all the uncertainty. And you look at Eddie Davis, who is reported to be going to Lyngby in Denmark, and that means Union 2 are going to be losing the leading goal scorer, 11 goals this season for Eddie. But we've seen players step up, and Leandro Soria was a player who stepped up when the Union 2 needed goals, provided 2 for them in this game. And so, yeah, both of those responses by Marlon were fantastic, and I think he's doing a great job with the second team. And we'll see. I wouldn't be shocked, honestly, if teams start to ask about him maybe becoming an assistant coach on first teams next year. I mean, he was also on the Duke podcast with Sage Hurley a couple weeks ago, talking about his ambitions, about what's next for his career. And he didn't shy away about talking about wanting to coach at a higher level, but he's with Union 2 and he's going to continue to do what he can do best, and developing players, making sure that they're ready when the opportunities present themselves with the first team. But this episode's gone so long. So long. So we're going to keep Blunder of the Week super short. And I hope you guys are fine with that. So Blunder of the Week is going to go to, probably should have went to me, but I think there's a player that is more deserving than giving Blunder of the Week to myself for not recording during Mike Sheriden talking to us in the locker room. That player is going to go to Aaron Boupenzda for getting his contract terminated, not by FC Cincinnati, by MLS as a whole.
Yeah, not good.
How you get your contract terminated by a league tells you how bad you messed up someplace. And it's been controversy after controversy with this guy. First, he gets suspended last season for the last regular season game for Cincinnati because he returns late to the club from international duty. Then in January, Boupenzda was involved in a sex tape scandal, gets him exiled from the national team. Then he gets his jaw broken while out in a bar this year in Cincinnati, out 6 to 8 weeks. And then the most recent report said that Boupenzda wasn't playing with Cincinnati because he was ill. Well, then there was reports out that he's been seen by multiple people saying that, yeah, he's fine in Cincinnati. This is a guy who does not care. He was the guy who was supposed to replace Brenner and just really be the next big thing in Cincinnati. And he's been anything but. Yeah, he has 9 goals in 35 appearances, I want to say it is. I didn't look at the numbers, but yeah, I mean, he has scored goals for Cincinnati, and when he's been on the field, he's looked impressive, but unfortunately, there's just been a lot more controversy surrounding this player than good moments. So it is insane to me that, no, Cincinnati didn't have to terminate his contract. MLS as a league did it as a whole. It is insane. I don't know if that's ever happened before. Have we seen MLS ever terminate a player's contract? I don't know. But that's not a good sign. And I'm sure Boupenzda's time in MLS is completely done. And we'll see where he winds up. I'm sure some team will pick him up. He is still 28 years old. Was playing in Saudi Arabia before he came to FC Cincinnati, so maybe he goes back to get paid in Saudi Arabia. Who knows? But a lot of controversy surrounding this dude and his time in Cincinnati. Dunzo. So if you guys aren't following the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, follow at Free Kick Pod, wherever you get your podcast, The Free Kick. Make sure you check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/freekickpod. Check out the Substack, thefreekick.substack.com. I do have to start doing these podcasts live because I did pay for Riverside Live. So we'll see when I eventually get that figured out, worked out, and hopefully you guys will tune in for these live episodes and just send your thoughts. Tell me when I'm doing good. Tell me when I'm doing bad. Bring up anything that maybe I might have missed. And yes, for my pronunciation, you guys can judge me live on YouTube or wherever else that I decide to stream to. It's dumb though. I love Twitter. It's the social media site that I'm most active on, but I saw for me to stream live on Twitter, unfortunately, I have to pay for it. So I don't know. I mean, would people watch on Twitter instead of YouTube? I feel like when people watch live podcasts, it's always on YouTube and not really Twitter. But having multiple different options isn't a bad thing. So I do have to get that all set up, but it's there. And so I appreciate you guys, as always, listening to the podcast. I appreciate you guys checking out the content. Hopefully you guys like the clips that I posted on social media of Marlon, of Jakob Glesnes, did I do one for CJ Olney yet? I don't think I did, but yeah, I mean, Union 2 was fantastic, and I'd be lying if I said that I didn't have more fun at Union 2 than I did the first team game. Union 2 was fantastic, and if you haven't been to a game, I know it's so tough with some of those games during the week and not the weekend. Took advantage of a fantastic weekend to go out, and yeah, I mean, the Union are a top-class organization. Shout out Nico. Really, really great dealing with him and getting whatever players that I want to speak to, bringing out Marlon, and does a fantastic job there with the Union. One of their undeserved heroes. So shout out to you, Nico. But with that said, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.